Hey, everybody, and welcome back to our podcast here at Antioch Church. And today we are talking about the last of the political issues that we have begun to dive into. And this one is going to be probably the simplest. I'm not going to go I think there's a lot of rabbit trails that one could go to on this. Because there's a whole host of appealing to the experts, and I am just not one. And I don't want to pretend to be an expert, to be quite honest with you. But I think that there's some basic ideas around this particular topic that we can think about as the church, and see how it affects people. And so today the topic is on climate change. And this has become a really big political issue, and it's in part because of the way kind of the ethos of America has shifted in the way that we think. I point back to one of the episodes earlier, remember, talked about how the political has become religious for people, almost. Like the political climate has become so all-consuming. It's what people's lives are consumed by, and everybody's thinking about it. It seems to me, in many cases, quite often, and so that means that a whole bunch of different issues get brought into the center, and then they become political, and there becomes policy ideas around them. There becomes government action around them. And then those things affect people on the ground, and those ideas get pulled with a varying degree of intensity. And I think the more that certain ideas become publicly communicated in a kind of a bigger way, the more they take up people's attention. And then when something's presented, it draws all sorts of attitudes. So I want to talk about why it's important to talk about climate change. I think one of the number one reasons is because it's easy to write off. Why is it easy? It's easy to write off, I should say. Definitely if you're on the conservative side of the aisle. I think also in that realm, it's easy to write off as a Christian in some cases. But I think there's certain applications where maybe we shouldn't just write it off as a part of our call as humans. But we should think about it differently for sure than the way that the world thinks about it. So it's the reason why I think it can be easy for Christians sometimes to write off. It's either easy for them to write off or get confused by it. Let me clarify there. I think that's a better way to say it. It's easy to write off because it gets put in this alarmism kind of category, this emergency kind of category. Or it's easy to accept wholeheartedly because we simply say, well, we should care about the earth. This is a good thing to care about the earth. And so then we adopt things wholeheartedly because the experts say this. I think that's a better way to frame this out. And so when it comes to this, I think the reason why it can become easy to, I've seen many people, roll their eyes or just kind of nonchalantly talk about this particular issue because it's become a point of alarmism. To be quite honest, I think climate change has it's the Armageddon of a secular worldview, right? When you have a worldview that doesn't believe in God and that doesn't and that thinks that humans are have kind of taken the place of divine, well, then that kind of gives humans, if we have the ability to say what is right and what is wrong. If we are the source of what is right and what is wrong, well, we're also the source of maintaining. We can be the source of our life as well as our own destruction. And people are finding the religion of self very appealing. Well, there is oftentimes in religion there is an end times thinking, and obviously in the Christian worldview, there's very clear end times thinking. I think climate change is the Armageddon or the apocalypse perspective or the end times thinking of the secular world. And so then what happens is you have to, if they're staying consistent, then everything has to be mankind's fault. but then mankind has to be able to have the solution about it. Now, on a theological level, we did not create the earth. We do not have the ability to destroy the earth. We can damage the earth, and there will be judgment based on what we do or don't do in stewarding what God has given us to steward, one of those things being creation. So we can receive judgment from that. But ultimately, creation is in God's hands, and He has the ability to say, to maintain or to destroy something. He has the ability to make something prosper and thrive, or the ability and the authority to wipe something out. So I think this is important to talk about because it's easy to get swept up in that kind of thinking in the rest of the world, or it's easy to dismiss a topic that there's elements of this topic we absolutely need to care about, and primarily being stewardship. But one of the reasons why I want to talk about it is because I think that there is a certain morality to specifically climate change policy, that climate change becomes an excuse to aggressively make certain actions or pull certain levers of a political or governmental level, and those things have incredible impact beyond just the climate, right? So if you have something that's as big of an existential threat as the destruction of the earth, and we need to do something about it. We need to do something about it now. There's been a way that's now been created to justify whatever actions are necessary to preserve something. And this has been a conversation that's been happening for a long time. I know back in the 70s, the concern was global cooling, and then it's shifted to global warming, and that's why they shifted the phrase to climate change, is because it's a little bit more ambiguous. But with I remember global warming. I remember when I was in school, they made us watch Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth, which yeah, never mind. That's all I'll say about that. We were required to watch Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth when I was in high school, and there were certain prophecies that were given in that movie that even by around this time period, that we would be in incredible grave danger if we didn't do anything. Within 20 years, certain elements in the earth would be irreversibly damaged. And a lot of those things that were predicted in An Inconvenient Truth were just plain turned out to be untrue. And it was an opportunity to try to, really platform certain ideas. The challenging thing with this is then it lends to giving up certain levers of control that lead to justifying different things that have other effects in other areas. So I'm not necessarily trying to talk about the substance of specific climate change policy, or of the maybe that's what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to necessarily talk about specifically a whole lot of different issues specifically, or break down a number of different issues specifically when it comes to climate change policy. What I am trying to say is these policies, though, generally seem to have effects in other areas, like conversations around requiring everybody to have electric cars by a certain time period, or even farmers to all have fully electric combines and things like that by a certain date, and a desire to aggressively push this. Well, then when you do that, you're not thinking about other consequences in other areas, right? I think sometimes simple consequences need to be thought. Well, we might be trying to achieve this good thing, but is it going to achieve every other area of good that we need it to achieve? And so sometimes the morality of different climate change policy, in my opinion, gets brought into question. And it's specifically, this is where I'm going to try to speak on the broad scale. It specifically becomes when certain policy out of alarmism becomes so disruptive that it is now having a morally negative effect on everybody else, where it's limiting everybody else's livelihood, or it's limiting their capacity to actually even just be able to function in their normal day-to-day or in society because of overarching issues or points of legislation. Not that we've fully gotten there by any stretch of the means, but that's where some of the conversation tends to kind of go. And And I think that what needs to be held accountable when it comes to our politicians is thinking of the ulterior effects, right? And thinking of the effect in every way. Do we have the capabilities of being able to have enough batteries, sustainable enough, and to hold that much reserved energy produced by other means? What's the effect on the climate itself of getting all the products or the minerals necessary to create such batteries or to create such means of production or of harnessing energy in other ways, right? So we're not necessarily asking all sorts of questions. In the broad sense of climate change, there's a desire to go after certain industry and certain industries that would radically not only change the way that we function as a society on an energy level, but also on an economic level. It would radically be incredibly detrimental to a lot of people. And out of care for a lot of those people, I think that there's some sense where we need to care about this. But I think the biggest thing that I really want to talk about today, other than some of those concerns that I have, and by the way, a number of those things come down to when it comes to the climate change policy and thinking about the climate change policy, I have further opinions about those things. I'm just trying to say we should be broadly thinking of how this affects everything, not just this one thing. That's ultimately what I'm trying to get at there. And that would reveal a sense of moral thinking around pushing different climate change policies, right? And when you use something as an apocalyptic kind of means to push a certain policy, well, that should change the way that we think about the issue. Well, are there other goals here? Is this as dangerous as it's being said? Is this a problem? Yes or no? And be honest. Maybe there is an element where it's a problem. Maybe there's an element where it's not. But I think we should be willing to wrestle with those things and think about them so that we can really effectively think about their moral outcomes. Right? If something is enacted, well, what's the outcome, and how is that going to affect people? And is it right to just pull different levers of government or policy or legislation, or to seek to get to certain legislation in the name of one goal, and how is it affecting the whole? So those are things that I definitely have opinions about. But the thing that I care about on the biblical level that I really think that we all need to wrestle with, and it's interesting because I've found that here in the state of Montana, because so many people love the outdoors, and so many people are hunters, or they love to hike, they love to camp, right? There's already a general appreciation for nature that's just different than, let's just say, where I come from, right? So where I come from in the city, if you did talk to conservatives, or if you did talk to people who had that bend, oftentimes it's funny. I just found that people would kind of roll their eyes at talking about climate change because of how much it has been kind of propagandized, if that's a word, how much it has been leveraged for political gain, particularly on the political left. And so people on the political right would, kind of just roll your eyes at it. Out here in Montana, it's just different because everybody cares about the environment, because it's, it is most people's source of recreation, of retreat, of leisure, and there's a different kind of love for nature, a love for the earth, a love for the outdoors here. And it's something actually I really appreciate about living here in Montana is there is that care. And part of that is, I think, is a very good and godly thing, right? Like the Lord called when he created us, when we were created in Genesis 1, we were called to what? Steward the earth. There was supposed to be a blessing in working the ground, in caring for, and tending to creation. And there were certain hardships that were brought in by the fall in that, but it doesn't mean that we weren't still supposed to do that. We are still called to care for the earth. We are still called to do well by God's creation that he has allowed us to live in. All right, even think of the year of Jubilee for for the people of Israel. When you read about the year of Jubilee in the Torah, you'll find that even the land in the seventh year is supposed to get rest. There's supposed to be a rest for the land, a year of rest for the land in the seventh year. So there's an idea even ingrained in the people of Israel that there is a part of stewardship of the land that God is giving you that is supposed to be ingrained in us. Jesus, when he's challenged on healing somebody on healing somebody on the Sabbath, he says, would any one of you, if your ox had fallen into a pit, would you go get it, or would you just leave it? And his point is, all of you would go get your ox. So how much more should I care for this one that needs healing, this person, this human being that needs healing? And his point there isn't don't care about the ox, care about the human. His point there is care about the human the most, even more so, but also you would also want to care about the things that the creatures, the points of creation that you were called to steward. And Jesus is, again, his point in all of this is, look, he is Lord of the Sabbath. He's Lord of all of it. And he is a Lord of creation. He's Lord of the beast of the field, and he's the Lord of humanity. And he's the Lord of all of it. And there is a role of stewardship, I think, that is in the heart of God that should push us to desire to care for the creation around us, the things around us that God has placed around us, the wildlife around us, the creation in general. And so I do think that there is a sense that, we shouldn't want to dirty up the earth. We shouldn't not care about what we do with our garbage. We shouldn't not care, about how we interact with nature. We should be thinking of the best ways to do well by the land also, but more importantly, how do those things affect people? And if we seek the good of people, if we seek the benefit of everybody around, and in that we can seek to do right and to care for well the creation with which God has given us, then that would be a positive thing. Now, again, as I said before, I'm not really an expert, so I don't necessarily on when it comes to creation. I'm not a geologist. I'm not a conservationist. I'm not, any of these things. I'm not an expert in any sense of the way. But I do think that as believers, we should seek to find what are the best ways that we can actually steward the earth. And so then when it comes to whether it's different policies that people are presenting politically, actually ask questions. Is that actually going to help us steward the earth? Or is that going to help us push a certain kind of agenda? And I think those are the kind of questions that we should be asking. Is it going to achieve the actual good that it said it's going to achieve? And then how is that going to affect people? Or is it going to help push a certain kind of political agenda that in the end might in fact hurt the earth and also hurt people? And so, and I think as those that are called as stewards of creation, we are called first and foremost to care about people, because there is a human supremacy that God has established, right? Remember, we're the only ones that are created in his image. He creates all the beasts of the field, all the plants, all the fish, all the birds. He creates everything, and he only makes us in his image. So there's a different value that's placed on humanity than on everything else. But within that, though, as humans, we must care for everything because he has put us in charge of everything. By mandate from God, we need to care about the things that he has made. And so, and I think that should kind of just be our foundational paradigm when it comes to thinking about an issue such as climate change. So, as I said, this is a more brief conversation. It's a more simple conversation. And I don't try to pretend to be an expert on any of the issues that I've discussed. But I know I'm not an expert on this issue in particular. I just want us to be thinking a little bit more clearly, more carefully on what do these things actually achieve when they're being talked about in a legislative kind of fashion. Or in a policy kind of fashion, what are they actually going to achieve? And is it actually going to be good for people? And is it going to be good for creation? and what are some of the downstream effects of that. And so I think caring about those things are all really important and would help us as Christians engage in conversation actually with people that are very passionate about this issue. Remember I said that this has kind of become the apocalypse or Armageddon of a secular worldview. And so people are very passionate about it. And if we don't know how to engage in conversation in a way that's helpful, like, no, actually we should care for the earth. But we should also care about all of these other things and see how this comes together, because God has given us a mandate to steward creation, and we also have to care for people. And I think that would help us to be able to have helpful conversations with people that maybe don't know the gospel and are passionate about this issue, and maybe this is a significant issue for them, which I know it has been for some. And it has been an issue that people get caught up on, and I just want us to be able to know how to have those conversations, or at least have a foundational way of thinking that would help us have those conversations. So, okay, that's all I have to say about that. Thank you for joining me on this episode of our podcast here, and I hope this was helpful. I hope all of these have been helpful. Please feel free to reach out. I probably said something wrong at some point in one of these, probably multiple times, and maybe I need to clarify something that I said incorrectly, or maybe clarify something that I kind of left ambiguous. I know I talked a lot about a lot of issues, and these are much bigger issues that could be much longer conversations. But I just appreciate your grace in that, and I just hope that this is helpful and thought-provoking. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.